Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to welcome all of you to CBP's first virtual trade week. In the midst of this global pandemic and the vast challenges we're all navigating, I really believe by us coming together in this way shows our collective commitment, yours and ours, to continue our persistent and ongoing dialogue and candid discussions about the most pressing issues facing CBP and you, the trade community. As acting commissioner, a little more than a year ago, with less than 2 weeks on the job, I addressed the trade symposium in Chicago. I was truly excited that day and very much looking forward to continuing our great partnerships. That day seems like a lifetime ago, given the events of this past year. In Chicago, I committed to transparency, communication, and collaboration. So I'd like to take just a couple of minutes to discuss some of the ways that I think CBP has delivered on that commitment. First, transparency. In my experience over decades of public service, improving and delivering effective transparency is an essential element to enhancing trust. And trust is essential to strengthening partnerships and getting things done for your business to thrive and for our mission to succeed. Two examples come to mind, and we'll be discussing both in depth today and tomorrow. First, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. CBP is working extremely hard to ensure that our partners in the trade community have the information and resources they need to comply with the new USMCA. Earlier this year, CBP established the USMCA Center to create a one-stop shop for all your questions about the agreement. To date, the center has hosted more than 50 free webinars to provide timely and up-to-date information to more than 4,200 customs brokers, trade attorneys, freight forwarders, and producers. The center has also created a website that includes a chatbot to quickly answer user questions about this landmark trade agreement and how it's being implemented. This is a monumentous trilateral trade pact, and it's critical that we all stay on the same page about it. Second, forced labor. CBP continues to be transparent about the measures we're taking to protect the competitiveness of American businesses by investigating and addressing allegations of forced labor in the U.S. supply chains. CBP issues withhold release order, WRO, when it has information that reasonably indicates that goods produced using forced labor are being imported in the United States. CBP publishes all WROs on our website to provide relevant information and send a clear message to the trade community and the public that we will not tolerate forced labor in the U.S. supply chains. Now, let's talk about communication. This has always been a top priority for CBP, and nothing has changed. And I know that I'm being Captain Obvious when I say that it is also one of the most challenging areas to maintain in this fast-paced, ever-changing landscape we have to navigate on a daily basis. Let's face it, information is not effective without proper context and without getting it to the right people at the right time in the right format. Open channels of communication are essential to informed decision-making as well as timely and efficient problem-solving. I'd like to share a straightforward but nonetheless important example. In late March, a Tier 3 partner in our CTPAT program tried to import a shipment of PPE and hand sanitizer intended for emergency distribution to medical facilities. The shipment was held at our port of Seattle due to non-compliant product labeling. The CTPAT importer reached out to their assigned national account manager at the CBP Centers of Excellence and Expertise in Los Angeles for assistance. That led to mutual coordination and communication among the Los Angeles CTPAT field office, the Seattle field office, the Port of Seattle, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Food and Drug Administration. Tremendous communication. Working together, we all determined that the best methods to get these products to Washington area hospitals where they were so desperately needed to manage the COVID-19 pandemic. Thanks to these communication channels, the shipment was released in less than 24 hours. Finally, there's collaboration. I see collaboration as the umbrella which is essential to guiding and driving us all to work together as partners to develop strategies to become more transparent, to strive to implement persistent and improved communications, and remained laser focused together on facilitating all areas impacting the flow of legitimate trade. As an example, CBP collaborates closely with our industry stakeholders through relationships with our advisory committees, the Commercial Customs Operations Advisory Committee and the User Fee Advisory Committee. CBP also maintains robust dialogue with all types of association that represents everyone from brokers to importers, from exporters to express consignment companies, as well as airlines, trucking, rail, and maritime companies, and many other industry sectors. One terrific example of collaboration in action involves the Entry Type 86 test in our Automated Commercial Environment, or ACE. It is particularly important as the number of electronic filings continue to grow. The test was created to address significant enforcement concerns in the low-value shipment environment after the Trade Facilitation and Trade Enforcement Act of 2015 increased the de minimis value threshold from 200 to 800. Not long after last year's trade symposium, we deployed this test in cooperation with trade representatives, including COAC members and partner government agencies. From the very start, after this sea change in the de minimis rules, CBP has worked with you, our stakeholders, on everything from conception and development to implementation and deployment. We learned so much from our meetings with importers, brokers, and software vendors, just about every facet of the supply chain, about industry capabilities and how to identify new ways of collecting the right data. At one point, we held a live webinar for brokers that drew more than 800 trade participants. Thanks to this collaboration, the Entry Type 86 test has been really successful. By December 2019, CBP had already accepted over 1 million Entry Type 86 test filings. In the 11 months since the initiation of the test, CBP has accepted more than 80 million Entry Type 86 entries, the majority of which have been filed for the air shipments. Another example of successful collaboration involves the Section 321 data pilot, which we announced at last year's trade symposium. You're going to be learning and hearing much more about this on Thursday afternoon. But the bottom line is that the pilot has been instrumental in forging a real partnership between CBP and major e-commerce trade stakeholders and addressing the constantly shifting e-commerce landscape. This partnership is crucial given the fact CBP processes more than 600 million small packages a year. These shipments pose the same health, safety, and economic security risks as containerized shipments. But the advanced electronic data CBP receives via the manifest filings for de minimis shipments often do not accurately reflect shipment origin, contents, destination, and responsible parties. The e-commerce task force, comprised of online marketplace, carriers, customs brokers, and freight forwarders who work collaboratively with CBP. The pilot marks the first time that CBP is able to accept shipment-level information directly from online marketplaces and match it with the information we receive from traditional carriers to better address e-commerce risk. CBP publicly announced the 9 pilot participants in January, and so far we have collected data on more than 42 million shipments. We have received positive feedback from trade stakeholders as well as from our personnel at the affected ports, suggesting there are real benefits for CBP operations as well as for our participants. It's a win-win thus far, and you'll find out more about this at Thursday's e-commerce panel. I'm confident you're going to learn a lot this week, but we look forward to learning just as much from you, which is why we've designed things to be as interactive as our current situation permits. You'll hear about our top trade activities, and you'll hear about them directly from our subject matter experts, with daily addresses by CBP's top leadership, including Executive Assistant Commissioner Brenda Smith with the Office of Trade, Executive Assistant Commissioner Bill Farrar with the Office of Field Operations, and of course, Deputy Commissioner Bob Perez, who will help close things out Friday before the last panel. Clearly, CBP is not about to let a global pandemic prevent us from connecting, even virtually, with our trade stakeholders. You are so important to our continued economic growth and security. I sincerely hope you enjoy Virtual Trade Week. Thank you. I look forward to being with you in person, hopefully soon. Until then, I hope that you, your families, and colleagues stay healthy and well.
Thank you, Acting Commissioner Morgan, and greetings and welcome. I would say good afternoon, but I know we have people joining us from all over North America. I want to thank each one of you for participating in Virtual Trade Week. I understand we have over 2,500 people attending today. I suppose it is some lemonade out of the current situation we find ourselves in. We're able to reach twice as many participants than we would have at a physical venue. Our topic this afternoon, the first of 5 panels, which will take place this week, is the USMCA, or TMEC, or Kuzma. I suppose that makes us the headliner. So whatever you choose to call it, depending on where you sit, the important thing is that this historic trade agreement sets a template for both economic prosperity and security for North America. Not just a replacement for Nafta, the USMCA provisions are cross-cutting in nature and affect multiple sectors of the global economy. The USMCA will facilitate mutually beneficial trade, leading to freer markets, fairer trade, and robust economic growth in North America. The USMCA seeks to rebalance trading relationships in North America through having changed the legacy NAFTA provisions on investment protection, government procurement, and rules of origin for key manufacturing sectors, especially automobiles. The USMCA also provides strong, effective protection and enforcement through enhanced enforcement capabilities and unprecedented incorporation of our 3 customs administrations' best practices in areas such as trusted trader and authorized economic operator, single window, risk-based analysis, targeting, trade advisory committees, and post-clearance audit. So I'll leave the pronunciation of TMEX to one of our panelists. So all 3 names, as you'll hear throughout our presentation today, refer to this USMCA, TMEC, or Kuzma. So some of the key provisions I want to call out before we get into our panel discussion. I'm going to go through starting with the new rules for digital trade. The new digital chapter contains the strongest disciplines on digital trade of any international agreement, providing a firm foundation for the expansion of trade and investment in innovative products and services. Engagement of small and medium-sized enterprises. We want to increase the trade opportunities for small and medium-sized enterprises through export assistance centers, business incubators, information exchanges, public websites, and small and medium-sized enterprise committees. The agreement establishes the North American Competitiveness Committee, composed of trilateral government representatives. The purpose is to promote economic integration among the parties, enhance competitiveness of North American exports, develop modern physical and digital trade and investment-related infrastructure to improve the movement of goods and provision of services within North America, and to provide advice and recommendations to the Free Trade Commission. There is also new competition policy provision. This provision expands on provisions of the legacy NAFTA, and its purpose is to ensure fair competition by requiring parties to adopt and maintain laws against anti-competitive business conduct. We've heard a lot about rules of origin. Well, in the USMCA, they're to be more liberal for some products and actually more stringent for others. Overall, the rules of origin promote production in North America, and they streamline certification and verification rules of origin and strengthen enforcement. This agreement establishes committees focused on various aspects of rules of origin. Customs and trade facilitation provisions. The customs and trade facilitation measures aimed to simplify the flow of international trade through increased transparency and expedited release of express shipments. Trade remedies. The USMCA contains provisions to safeguard investigations, duty evasion, dispute settlement, and promoting transparency in anti-dumping and countervailing duty proceedings. Environmental. The USMCA contains provisions to promote mutually supportive trade and economical policy practices. And environmental policy practices. It promotes enforcement of environmental laws and enhances cooperation to support sustainable development. And not to mention new forced labor provisions. The USMCA provides new enforcement resources for the United States to perform capacity building and training to our colleagues, including addressing human trafficking and emphasizing the importation of source goods from forced labor, illegal in all three countries. Note that tomorrow we have a full panel discussion focused on forced labor. And lastly, anti-corruption provisions. The anti-corruption provisions in the agreement confirms our country's commitment to deter corruption and bribery in international trade and investment through domestic enforcement. Well, enough of me talking. I'd like to now introduce our diverse panel, and we will be discussing USMCA implementation and enforcement, compliance with USMCA requirements, and provide insights to what this agreement means for the North American economy. First, I'd like to introduce Jorge Arturo Alvarez Tovar from Mexico's Ministry of Finance, Customs and Tax Affairs to discuss the implementation of TMEX. Jorge is the Minister Representative of Mexico's Ministry of Finance for Tax and Customs Affairs in the United States since January of 2019. In such capacity, Minister Alvarez is the leading negotiator and Mexico's contact point for bilateral customs and fiscal-related issues. Minister Alvarez coordinates the working groups created to develop and implement the customs initiatives under the U.S.-Mexico Customs Bilateral Strategic Plan. Jorge, I'll turn it over to you for opening remarks.
Everyone, or actually, good morning for those viewers in the West Coast. Let me just begin by thanking the U.S. Customs and Border Protection for the invitation to this first virtual trade week. I am so excited to be here participating today. And of course, thank you, Cynthia, for hosting this panel, this extraordinary panel with great colleagues and partners from CBP, from Cbsa, but also from the private sector, which in fact you will be very, very well represented in this panel. So I'm going to be very brief in these initial remarks, since I rather have an open conversation between our panelists and with you, of course. So therefore, I'll just briefly stress how important it is the USMCA or TMEC, as we call it in Mexico, for the economic recovery of Mexico and of North America as a region. And that is exactly the message that our president came to convey here to Washington, D.C. a couple of months ago when he met with President Trump. And in fact, a week ago, the Mexican president, during his second address to the people, let's say similar to the address to the Union, he mentioned, or he said, that USMCA or TMEC signifies or can be the driver for productive activities, for attracting investments, for job creation, and ultimately for more welfare. And with that in mind, you can be sure that us as customs authorities are fully engaged and committed to a successful implementation of the agreement. So we know for sure that a successful implementation at the border, at the ports of entry of the agreement is paramount to this end. So once again, we are devoting all our efforts to the successful implementation of the agreement. And I can tell you that you can count on us, you can consider us as your partners in order for you to comply with the agreement. So with that, I will turn back to you, Cynthia.
Thank you, Jorge, for those opening remarks. Next, I'll turn to our northern partners, the Canadian Border Services Agency, Doug Band. Doug Band is the Director General of CBSA's Trade and Anti-Dumping Program. Doug joined CBSA in 2017 from the Treasury Board Secretariat, where he was the Executive Director responsible for federal regulatory policy from 2010 through 17. In this role, he designed and led government-wide implementation of reforms to the regulatory system that reduced red tape costs on business and improved regulatory transparency. He also supported the work of a ministerial advisory committee on red tape reduction, comprised of senior Canadian business leaders and consumer group representatives. Doug, I'll turn it over to you for opening remarks.
Thanks very much, Cynthia. I hope everyone can hear me well, and I'm deeply appreciative of the opportunity to be with you. And so I want to thank CBP for the invitation to be part of today's discussions. I want to reassure everybody that you're absolutely missing nothing by not being able to see me live on your screen. And certainly one quick look at the picture from my bio should be proof enough of that. Entry into force of the CUSMA on July 1st marked an important milestone in the evolution of our trading relationship with the United States and Mexico. I thought what I would do is just give a quick overview, because we want to get to the panel discussions, of some of the key elements of the CUSMA that bring changes for business and what we at CBSA are doing to clear the path for implementation. For those who don't know, CBSA is responsible for customs administration in Canada, ranging from the risking and processing of commercial goods through the assessment and reassessment of duties and taxes, as well as enforcement of compliance as directed by our international commitments, domestic law, and supporting policy and procedures. As Cynthia mentioned, as the DG of Trade and Anti-Dumping Programs in Canada, my team plays a key role in implementing Canada's commitments in three areas. First, origin procedures. Secondly, the new chapter on Customs and Trade Facilitation, Chapter 7, as well as trade remedies, our anti-dumping and countervailing regime. All changes that are being made to Canadian Customs are highlighted on our CBSA webpage, and I'll be giving this information afterwards to the organizers, so don't worry about writing it down. That page is entitled Kuzma, What Importers Need to Know. And here you'll find an overview of all the customs-related changes and links to all of the various regulations, customs notices, and policy that you'll need to have as we all together implement the new agreement. When I step back and I look across the agreement and its implications for customs, I think it's safe to say there's a dual thrust to the improvements being brought to bear. The first, and clearly the overarching one, is the drive to modernize and streamline the customs experience through the adoption of e-solutions, by reducing unnecessary and unjustified red tape, by simplifying procedures and standardizing how we work. But that drive to modernize is backstopped by a clear focus on ensuring that the rules are enforced effectively and appropriately by each party. That compliance enforcement is grounded in transparent, predictable expectations and procedures with due regard for privacy and confidentiality, and this is important as well, in close collaboration across the customs authorities. Let's take a look at how this plays out in origin procedures. Gone are the days of a prescribed hard copy form, replaced by minimum data elements to certify origin, and with the flexibility to do so electronically and with digital signatures. And exporters and importers, exporters and producers, are not just importers, can be certifiers. But whoever certifies must have the records to provide proof of the origin on request, and of course the importer needs it upon importation. And importantly, exporters and producers, now that they can become certifiers, also have full appeal rights as well. But the emphasis here is on the outcome, not the means to get there. Clear, basic facts required to establish origin is what matters. Who's the certifier? What are these goods? What's the HS code being cited? What rule of origin, product specific or otherwise, is being used to justify preferential treatment? The parties have also agreed to eliminate the requirement to certify origin when it comes to low value shipments. Now in Canada, we've seized the opportunity the agreement brings to expand this benefit further, at the same time raising our low value shipment threshold to $3,300, up from $25. This means more businesses will see reduced custom requirements for these low value shipments when they report, provide advance information for release and account. For example, shipments over 3,300 have to submit accounting documentation within 5 days of release. Importers of these low value shipments below 3,300, including non-resident importers in the US, won't have to submit final accounting until late the following month. At the same time, the agreement codifies origin verification expectations and processes, clarifies document retention responsibilities of certifiers, and provides for company site visits and collaboration between the authorities. Now let's take a look quickly at the new chapter on customs and trade facilitation. Here again, we see this dual focus on reducing transaction costs by modernizing and streamlining the customs experience, backstopped by robust and predictable compliance enforcement and collaboration. In keeping with the agreement's focus on facilitation through e-solutions, Canada's single window will play an important role, giving industry the ability to submit their custom documents electronically. We will also have raised our de minimis for goods imported by courier from the US and Mexico, and that's an important underlying point. Goods imported by courier from the US and Mexico, $150 for customs duties and $40 for taxes. Imports from non-custom countries on the international mail stream will still have a de minimis of $20. Similarly, Canada will give importers up to 4 years to make corrections to their declarations and to seek refunds, up from 1 year under Nafta. Requirements to issue advance rulings, including for valuation and to ensure consistency across our territory, will assist voluntary compliance and enhance predictability for business. The agreement commits to promoting voluntary compliance, to not penalizing companies when they self-correct, as long as it's before a verification starts. And importantly, it provides duty-free access for handicraft goods, which will benefit cottage industries, Indigenous groups, and small businesses. But as I said, these facilitating measures are also bringing with them calls for strengthening compliance through collaboration, information sharing among the customs administrations, including to address trade fraud. And Cusma makes it clear that practices designed to evade compliance will not be tolerated, be it through the evasion of anti-dumping and countervailing duties, or by dividing shipments into many entries so that each entry is eligible for new de minimis. These chapters and others, the chapters on origin and facilitation, when I juxtapose them alongside others, like the one mentioned on competitiveness, like the one on good regulatory practices, and those on the environment, make it clear that realizing the benefits of Cusma and assuring compliance with its obligations is a collective and collaborative enterprise. It's one that includes and recognizes the role and the rights of our Indigenous peoples and acknowledges our environmental and labor responsibilities. So in addition to providing information on the website that I talked about, we are very pleased to have the opportunity to meet regularly, trilaterally with our US and Mexican counterparts on implementation, and we're very pleased with the collaboration and information sharing thus far. In closing, put simply, implementation is the roll up your sleeves, hard work that we have to do together in the weeks, the months, and the years ahead. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with you today, and we at CBSA look forward to the journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. And I'll turn now to John Leonard. John Leonard serves as the Executive Director, Trade Policy and Programs at U.S. Customs and Border Protection. He leads CBP's strategic efforts to facilitate, enforce, and administer priority trade issues such as tariffs and trade remedies, intellectual property, free trade agreements, import safety, textiles, and anti-dumping and countervailing duty. From 2013 through 17, he served as CBP's attaché at Singapore, covering 8 countries, including Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Australia, and New Zealand. John, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Dak Wittenberg. And I'd like to also thank the other panelists for joining our discussion today. So I would absolutely agree with Doug that the USMCA was a major change for all of us, certainly for CBP, our U.S. government partners, our trade stakeholders, and our Canadian and Mexican partners. So it was tricky because you're moving from a very well-established, widely used trade agreement, right? 25 years for the Nafta, and now moving to something new. And while many of the aspects of USMCA and NAFTA are the same, there's key differences. So it was our intention at CBP to ensure that we gave maximum notice, education, and transparency to the trade and made sure that they were aware of those key changes. And we approached it really with a lot of energy and resources. You heard Commissioner Morgan mention our USMCA Center. So we stood that up literally on the same day that CBP headquarters went into the COVID-19 lockdown. So it really is a testament to our own personnel and our trade stakeholders and our Canadian and Mexican partners that we're able to work together to bring this agreement into force with really minimal disruption during a global pandemic. So it's our goal at the USMCA Center to ensure that the agreement is well understood and has been well implemented and remains a bedrock of North American trade as the NAFTA had for many years prior. So it really wasn't just standing up of a center. We've been very busy creating compliance guidance for the trade, including our implementing instructions, which went up earlier this spring, fact sheets, informational videos, and much more. And all this can be found on cbp.gov/trade. You heard the commissioner mention that we conducted over 54 live briefings to the trade with thousands of people in attendance. We delivered a whole series of comprehensive trainings to our more than 900 CBP employees at ports of entry all around the country to get them ready to answer your questions in the trade and be fully ready to implement on July 1st. So of course there have been challenges. One of the biggest questions that we've got into our chatbot is concerning the certificate of origin. So as Doug mentioned, we no longer rely on a formal certificate of origin. It now can be in really in any format, as long as the prescribed elements are answered. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in the discussion later today. We also have gotten many questions on the special program indicators, the SPIs for S or S+. Today, I'll get into more detail on what you use for each one of those. So as others have said, it's really, we look at the USMCA as a new standard for customs work. It's bringing into best practices many of the ideals that we've had for years and now has codified them, including single window, authorized economic operator, trusted trader, private sector advisory committees, a risk-based system of analysis and targeting, free and publicly accessible advanced binding rulings, and broker management, to name a few. So I look forward to the discussion today, and I will turn it back over to you, Ms. Wittenberg.
Thank you, John. Next, I'd like to bring on Patrick Ottensmeyer. He's the President and Chief Executive Officer for the Kansas City Southern Railway Company. He has served in this role since July of 2016. Mr. Ottensmeyer is also a member of KCS's Board of Directors. Headquartered in Kansas City, Missouri, KCS is a transportation holding company that has railroad investments in the United States, Mexico, and Panama. KCS's North American rail holdings and strategic alliances with other North American rail partners are primary components of a unique railway system linking the commercial and industrial centers of the United States, Mexico, and Canada. So I invite Mr. Ottensmeyer from KCS Railroad to provide a broad overview of how USMCA will provide economic opportunity, not just for the rail industry, but for all industries in the three countries. Patrick?
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks to CBP and very honored to be a part of this panel. I'll talk a little bit, just very briefly, about our company. As Cynthia mentioned, we are one of North America's largest railroads. Our rail network is split about evenly between the U.S. and Mexico, and we are the only North American railroad that has a direct ownership and operating activities in both U.S. and Mexico. As such, it is not only is it extremely important to us and our company, the resolution now of the trade agreement between the U.S. and Mexico, it is extremely important to our customers, many of whom I'm sure are represented in the audience. Large industrial companies, multinational companies doing business in Mexico to serve not only North American markets, but global markets and vice versa. A big part of our cargo movements are cross-border. About 40% of our total carload movements move across the U.S.-Mexico border, primarily at the Laredo Gateway. And if you look at those movements, the largest single commodity that moves across border is grain from the United States, the upper Midwest, moving into Mexico. But other products such as automobiles, electronics, steel, and most recently, as a result of some reforms in Mexican energy markets, refined petroleum products moving from the U.S. into Mexico. So I've been very involved, and our company has been very involved in the debate about NAFTA and USMCA. And I think the way I look at this, I often get asked the question, what is the most significant aspect of the new USMCA that relates to our company and our customers and the communities and nations that we serve? And there are a lot of changes, as some of the speakers have already alluded to and mentioned, improvements, modernization, things that are better about USMCA than NAFTA. But I think the single most important factor and the reason the factor that I give about the most important benefit of USMCA is its existence. The fact that we have this agreement and that it was approved with such overwhelming bipartisan majorities in all three countries. In fact, I'll use a quote from U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Robert Lighthizer talking about USMCA that I thought really captured the spirit of the new agreement and the relationship between the three countries, and that is USMCA is the gold standard by which all future agreements will be judged and citizens of all three countries will benefit for years to come. I truly believe that is the case. So the lack of the removal of the uncertainty about NAFTA and the new USMCA is certainly a very important and very significant factor. If you combine that with other factors that are influencing decisions of global supply chain leaders and manufacturers, particularly in the aftermath of the COVID global pandemic, the desire on the part of supply chain leaders to de-risk supply chains, and the movement and the opportunity, as Jorge mentioned, referring to a comment from President Lopez Obrador, that USMCA TMEC can be a driver to spur investment and job creation in North America, all of North America, all three countries. I wrote an op-ed piece in the Dallas Morning News, July 1st of this year, the day that USMCA entered into force, talking about what a wonderful opportunity this is for North America. And how important it is for us to get this off to a good start. I greatly appreciate all of the activities of CBP that were described earlier in terms of education, awareness, programming, data availability to try to make sure companies across North America and international companies as well understand the intricacies of this new agreement and how to utilize the features and understand the features to the benefit, hopefully doing all those things that Jorge mentioned, spurring investment and job creation and benefit of the economies of all three countries. We are certainly doing our part, I think, as a company. Shortly after USMCA was approved, we saw it and now has been approved a permit for a second international bridge at Laredo, Texas, connecting our network in Mexico and the U.S. And as I'm sure most people on this call and in the audience realize, Laredo is the largest and most significant gateway between U.S. and Mexico. And we see such opportunities for future traffic and volume growth and economic activity between the two countries that we want to proceed with the approvals. And now we're into the permitting and eventually the construction planning for a second bridge, which will obviously significantly increase our capacity to handle those cross-border movements of goods and raw materials between the U.S. and Mexico. And through our connections with other large railroads in North America, our interline connections serving important markets in Canada as well. So we see tremendous opportunity. One of the things that I asked for and I brought attention to in my op-ed piece, and I've been talking a lot in my circle of connections related to USMCA, is reestablishing a high-level economic dialogue, similar to that existed in previous administrations, with high-level, cabinet-level participation on the part of the administrations in all three countries and close coordination with private sector. I am the U.S. chair of an organization called the U.S.-Mexico CEO Dialogue, which, as the name implies, is an organization of CEOs, business leaders on both sides of the border, and using that group and similar entities in Canada to create that high-level connection, integration, dialogue, cooperation between government and business leaders to align priorities to make sure that we are all focused on taking advantage of what I really believe is a wonderful opportunity for all of North America. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity to participate today, and I will turn the program back to Cynthia. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, for providing a business perspective of the USMCA. Now, last but not least, rounding out our esteemed panel, I'm introducing Mark Stepien, who is the director of the Automotive and Aerospace Center of Excellence and Expertise, which is physically located, the headquarters of which in Detroit, Michigan. He's held this position since March of 2019. The center is staffed by trade professionals throughout the nation in a variety of occupations that are responsible for the facilitation of trade and trade enforcement of over $500 billion in imported merchandise annually. And Mark, I'll turn it over to you to kind of give some opening remarks, specific, I'm sure, to the auto industry and USMCA's impact there. Mark?
Thank you, Dec Wittenberg. Good afternoon, everyone. It's truly an honor and a privilege to be part of this esteemed panel. I've worked for the Legacy Customs Service and CBP now for over 33 years. In that time, I've held several trade positions and have monitored and enforced several free trade agreements to include the Automotive Products Trade Act, the Canadian Free Trade Act, the North American Free Trade Act, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, and several others. This is truly an exciting time for us at CBP. The Automotive and Aerospace Center of Excellence and Expertise is overseen by the Detroit Field Office within the Office of Field Operations And as Dak Wittenberg said, we process over $500 billion in importations annually, and we're the largest center by volume in fiscal 19. Employees are stationed at 45 locations nationwide in a variety of trade occupations. The centers of excellence and expertise are trade centers that take a holistic approach and process work by account, not commodity, to ensure uniformity of treatment regardless of the port of entry where the goods are cleared. The USMCA agreement is the highest volume free trade agreement administered by the ANA Center. All 10 centers have been actively engaged in preparation for the USMCA entry into force and implementation. For the past 18 months, the centers have worked with the CBP's Office of Trade Free Trade Agreements branch, the Chief Counsel's Office, Regulatory Audit and Advisory Services, the U.S. Trade Representative, CBP's Office of Trade Relations, the Department of Labor, and representatives from one U.S. government to ensure smooth and timely implementation. Several other offices and agencies have been represented as applicable to each center. Our CBP trade staff has been kept up to date as we progress toward implementation with ongoing training. My center committed staff to support the standing up of the USMCA Center, which has proven to be an invaluable resource for internal and external stakeholders alike. All of the centers have maintained constant communication with our stakeholders at all levels, to include brokers, importers, partnering government agencies, manufacturers, and other interested parties. We have open contact with industry groups and internal partners throughout CBP and the government at large. I regularly participate in the COAC USMCA Automotive Workgroup meetings and have been made aware of issues and given opportunities to address concerns that affect numerous stakeholders. Finally, I would like to add that we are available for any procedural questions regarding the implementation of the USMCA agreement. If we can't help, we serve as a direct conduit to the USMCA Center and will work together to get you the answers you need. As for the ANA Center, you might say we're where the rubber meets the road for this new agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Now that we have all of the introductions out of the way and opening remarks, I'd like to spur a discussion amongst the panelists, but I want to ensure you that you will have the opportunity to participate with us as well. Please do use the chat function to submit your questions, and we'll try to weave those in throughout the remaining hour of this panel. So at first, I'll turn it over to Jorge. What are some of the main challenges at the border due to the COVID pandemic, and what have we learned from this situation? Jorge?
Thank you, Cynthia. This situation with COVID has been unprecedented, and of course has posed a lot of challenges at the border. Of course, the main challenge is the health of our citizens, of our communities. There are large border communities coming and going like every day, crossing the border. So, of course, the health of our line officers, which they continue to develop or to do their functions at the border at risk of getting the virus. So we needed to make sure of their health and, of course, to comply with all the recommendations and guidelines from our health authorities. So I'll say, that was for sure the first big challenge that we faced. And of course, with that, and with some of the provisions that were put in place to keep the trade flowing. And I would say we've been doing actually a very good job in that regard, because at the moment we haven't heard of any major disruption at the border. At least not from the trade part. I think the measures that have been taken have been very well established, and there have been no major disruptions. Another challenge that certainly we had, and this is more kind of like a high-level government, I would say the alignment of the three different levels or sectors of government, meaning the federal, the state, and the local level, and specifically with so we were not very aligned in terms of the stages of COVID in U.S. and Mexico. Actually, U.S. and Canada were more like aligned, but Mexico was perhaps a month behind. So, and managing to align the three levels of governments and the provisions and dispositions of the three levels was a great challenge for sure. But I mean, in the end, and this is something I would say that a lesson learned is how highly integrated we are and how highly our economies are deeply integrated we are. And even though we knew that for sure for some specific sectors such as the auto industry, there are some other sectors where we were not that clear how greatly integrated we are. For instance, we didn't know that a little factory in Ciudad Juarez was providing for a specific component, that component was critical for the ventilators. So we didn't know that, and we knew at this moment, right? When the U.S. manufacturer, the U.S. factory was asking or demanding for the factory in Ciudad Juarez to open. So then, because it was a key component for them. So then we learned this, and I think we should see this opportunity of I mean, to really bring the supply chains to North America. I think we're at that we have that chance here at hand, and we need to seize that. And yeah, well, I think that is one of the opportunities that comes out of these. Of course, I would like to say also as a lesson learned is how well our formal and informal mechanisms at the border work. I mean, some of the decisions were taken at the ports of entry, and were taken, let's say, locally with all the not just the port authorities but other authorities at the local level, and whether to, for instance, whether to close lanes, which lanes, how many lanes, whether to change the opening hours, and of course that seeking to keep health, but also to keep trade flowing. And once again, these, let's say, informal mechanisms that I almost say perhaps they're more formal now because these are based on trust. Honestly, on trust that we have built for over at least a couple of decades, and every decision that we took were completely agreed, and they have worked perfectly. So I think we need, of course, to work a little bit more on perhaps on formalizing some of these mechanisms, perhaps to establish a rapid response protocols. So whenever we face something similar, we will know how to react, because it took us a little bit of time at the beginning, but in the end, I'll repeat, we did a great job. We're doing a great job, I think.
Thank you, Jorge. Patrick, do you have any lessons learned out of COVID that we are still going through, and maybe some of what we've learned in the early stages that we're now able to apply here in North America?
Yeah, I would agree with much of what Jorge mentioned. I think the supply chains, just from our experience, the way the border functioned was very good. We were able to move our trains across the border, move our employees across the border. Of course, a railroad enjoys essential service designation in all three countries, I believe, but certainly in the U.S. and Mexico. So we never had an issue with the ability of our employees to be able to go to work. The COVID impact did stress our system, as you may or may not know. Particularly our crew and union workers generally are assigned to certain regions of our network. So they don't all have the flexibility to work anywhere that we operate across our more than 7,000 mile network in the two countries. So regional availability of labor was a bit of an issue. And then as various health decrees in really in both countries, in the U.S. and Mexico. Just the ability to be clear on what that meant. For example, one of the issues that happened here in the United States, which doesn't directly tie to USMCA, but maybe a good illustration, is as states were beginning to put policies and restrictions in place, restricting travel from citizens in other states. We needed to make sure that we could operate without interruption as our trains moved across states and then certainly across the border. I think are some lessons learned. I agree with what Jorge said about supply chains. There was still a little uncertainty from time to time as you go deeper into the supply chains, the tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, and I think Jorge mentioned this, that everything was aligned to make sure that those supply chains were uninterrupted and able to perform and perform at a high level. But I think the ability of North American supply chains to respond to the challenges that this pandemic threw at us with very little notice was quite remarkable. Some room for improvement, but I think, again, this is one of the things that making sure that we have that alignment of policy priorities and objectives across all three countries is going to be a huge factor in realizing the opportunity that USMCA presents to us.
Thank you for that. I actually have a comment from a Robert Morris Jr., and I hope it's okay that I'm calling you out by name, but you said COVID at the border and the maintenance of the flow of commercial trade has been great. However, the local commerce is dying. What can we expect in the short term to alleviate this crisis of small businesses dying? That's a good question, and I'm not sure the folks on this panel and from where we sit can really address the small businesses and how they're struggling. But I do assure you that I know in the department we're using the authorities that we have available to us to help spur economic recovery where we can. And thank you for that question and comment. So I'll turn a little bit to some of the changes, looking at legacy NAFTA and moving to the USMCA in terms of compliance. And John, I'm going to direct this at you. Can you please highlight some of those key areas of concern?
Certainly. So I alluded earlier to the change regarding the certificate of origin. So for many of our careers, folks like myself who've been around a number of years, the NAFTA certificate of origin was always a very formal document. Years ago, it was actually a paper document, the Customs Form 434 in the United States. But USMCA has liberalized all of that. We no longer need an actual form. We can have the information come to us in an electronic format, as long as we get the prescribed elements that are outlined in the agreement. That is fine. However, the trade was still wanting a little bit more clarity, and so CBP actually has put together a suggested template that we have posted to our website, and that's been a very, very popular and welcome addition. It's in PDF format. You can download it, and again, I would stress it's only a suggested template. You do not have to use it. However, you can avail yourself of it if you'd like to just have something that's kind of predictable and reliable, and something that you can share with your colleagues in your own businesses or across the trade. So again, that is up now, posted onto cbp.gov/trade. That and many other information about the agreement. I also talked about a little bit of confusion on the special program indicators that we use in the United States for our entities, which are S and S+. The majority of your claims are going to be just the normal regular S. The S+ comes into play for certain agricultural goods as well as non-originating textile and apparel goods pursuant to the tariff preference level TPL provisions. So our International Trade Commission in the United States that publishes our harmonized tariff schedule, that really is the document you want to go to. They update it regularly, and that'll provide you information on when to use S and S+. So those have been two of the bigger kind of changes that we've seen on the customs side.
Thank you, John. And the whole idea around some of the liberalization around these certifying origin has been a point of concern from the trade. I know, Doug, you alluded to that in your opening comments that's occurring in the Canadian trade community as well. Doug, this is for you. What can be expected with regards to trade compliance verifications under Kuzma?
So yeah, just quickly, Cynthia, the experience in Canada very much on the certification as John described. We actually created a smaller group of the trade to dig into it. And what became apparent is that their thirst for something that they could use, and certainly welcome the template that the U.S. has provided, and I know custom brokers are providing their clients as well. They're very useful inputs to people. But what some of the larger firms that had more complex supply chains were saying is we like the ability to be able to use the data elements and prescribe that information being required within the management of our own supply chains. Because I have to tell you, I was very much drawn to the argument that we needed to do templates as well. And when we dug into it further, what was really, of course, lurking beneath all of this was a concern that when we get to the verification stage, whatever the industry in good faith put forward might not meet the test in an audit, and that might have significant downstream costs. So just, sort of dovetailing into your question, Cynthia, from a compliance standpoint and verification of origin, there's a lot of obligation, the vast majority of which we already meet in how we conduct verification already, but a lot of requirements around process and procedure, fair notice, respecting privacy, and so on. And when it comes to origin, we want to share the audit procedures that we'll be developing, not only with our industry group that we've created to advise on custom implementation, but with our counterparts in Mexico and the U.S. so that we can minimize any inadvertent misalignment. We have the uniform regulations that lay out very clearly what we've got to do. But let's make sure that we do it in such a way that when industry experiences it, there's not a lot of dislocation, and it feels pretty much similar, even though there may be some variability that's justifiable. On compliance verification, with the pandemic, we suspended all compliances, and I know others did as well. And we're just bringing that back onto line this week, in fact. So we've got a backlog to get through. So if there's anybody waiting for all of a sudden the world to change and compliance verifications of origin to be launched by Canada, please take a deep breath. Like our counterparts, our emphasis right now is on working with the trade to make sure that they are aware, understand, and that we are implementing all of the obligations through our procedures so that customer opportunities can be realized. One just point I wanted to raise hasn't come up, but we've had the question, advanced rulings under Nafta are no longer applicable and valid. So if you do want to have that upfront predictability and you're worried about downstream compliance costs, please do engage us and request an advanced ruling. That's the best way that we can help you to get it right up front. I have to say, though, that in theory, at least, and it is theory, the decision around what will be coming in terms of compliance, actual verification, of course, we've got a whole bunch of work in relation to Nafta that will continue and will apply the Nafta provisions. But in terms of new customer work, the period under assessment is a choice. And right now that choice has not been made. We could, in theory, go back to July 1, but we'll make that point at a later date because our eye is really squarely on the ball of making sure that industry has what they need. The other point on compliance, and forgive me, I'm going on, but I'll wrap it up quickly. I just want people to be aware of, because it will be of benefit and implication for some of you that do business in Canada extensively. We are in the middle of bringing to ground a major IT capital project, an IT transformation project called the Canadian Assessment and Revenue Management System. And as the title suggests, it's really transforming and automating and modernizing how we do the business of customs duty, assessment of taxes and duties. And it will give you the ability, once you get signed on to the system, to submit and self-correct all of your accounting documentation. Right now, we're a purely paper-based format, and that's not efficient or effective for anybody. So that ability will be there. You'll be able to monitor and see your statement of accounts and receive valuable information from us. From that standpoint, we're really excited about it. It should be coming on board in a significant way from a compliance standpoint within 2 years, because it'll give us the ability to issue nudges and other less costly, less burdensome interventions for compliance that will give you the feedback that you need, other than through a highly costly and long duration audit, to make the self-corrections and to have the kind of voluntary compliance that Cusma envisages. So we're very much headed in the direction and in the spirit that's envisaged under the agreement with this transformation and with the practices that we're putting in place already. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Doug. And I like how you phrase, let's just all take a deep breath. And that's one of the things we've been communicating, whether it's internal to CBP and the federal government or external. Let's all take a deep breath as we are moving into and have implemented USMCA. We're in the honeymoon period. And for those of you who are married, you know how honeymoons go. We're still getting to know each other in the rules of the particular game, so to speak. And so we're still in that honeymoon period. So we won't have a list of chores yet, do's and don'ts. So let's just enjoy this time of getting to understand the agreement and getting our ducks in order so that we can ensure you guys being the trade, that you are in place to comply. Since we're talking about verifications, I will turn to Jorge and tell us a little bit about what we can expect from Mexico with regards to trade compliance verifications under TMEC.
I will agree with I will agree with Doug. Of course, these origin procedures chapter is one of the chapters that had more changes and substantial changes, and it is one of the most important or relevant chapters in the agreement. And of course, we are getting used to these new set of regulations. Not just, of course, us as authorities, but the traders as well. So we need to understand well how it works. We need to gather some information, and it has been mentioned that now the certificate of origin is a free format, and then of course it needs to have the data elements set forth in Annex 5A. But still, it can be printed in an invoice, or it can be printed in a commercial document. It can be printed in a different document. So now it can be issued by importer, exporter, or producer. So even though for the importer, I must stress that for the importer, in case of Mexico, that still is not still possible or available. It will be until 3.5 years. Since the entry into force, so that means 3 years and 4 months, give or take. So it is a big change. There is a lot of changes in terms of regional value content, in terms of labor value content. Specific industries such as the auto. In terms of steel, etc. It is a big change, and we cannot expect to have everything perfect or everything as it is written in the agreement. And I liked how Doug mentioned it, like some variability will be understandable. Yeah, of course. And in case of Mexico, this is, so we have 13 free trade agreements with 50 countries, and every new free trade agreement, we need to allow for a certain period of time for traders to get used to the new rules, and that's what I'm pretty sure that's what we are going to do in this situation, to allow for a certain period of let's say maturation or maturity of the agreement, and so we can kind of like all get the same sense and the same grasp of how we need to be done and the information that we need. And yeah, I mean, that doesn't mean that we cannot do or we cannot perform a compliance verification. I mean, if there is a glaring violation or inconsistency, I mean, but I mean, in the end, of course, I will agree with Doug that we need to some sort of to be okay with some variability and in these compliance verifications at the moment, and give them some time for that.
Thank you, Jorge. Mr. Warren, I'm going to get to your question shortly, but I want to turn it over to Mark. And since we're on verifications, maybe you want to comment a bit about what the trade can expect, especially with respect to the auto industry.
And then that'll explain some of my comments regarding the verification process. Overall, it must be noted that country of origin marking rules are the same under USMCA as they had been under NAFTA. As Mr. Leonard stated, the agreement liberalizes the certification process. What I'd like to stress is that different entities may receive different formats from different manufacturers, exporters, or suppliers, and you shouldn't be hesitant about providing or accepting that information. As long as the data elements are present, they'll be acceptable to CBP. For automotive goods, there is an increased regional value content for it has increased from 62.5% to 70% for passenger vehicles and light trucks, and the new regional value content for heavy trucks is 70%. These increases will be phased in over 3 years for passenger vehicles and light trucks and over 7 years for heavy trucks. 70% of a manufacturer's aluminum and steel purchases must be obtained from the US, Canada, Mexico, or a combination of those countries. This applies to total purchases, whether or not they are utilized in vehicle production. So whether you're bringing in the steel or aluminum to build a facility or whatever usage you may have, it qualifies on an annual basis. The new labor value content requirement mandates that 30% of the cost of the passenger vehicles now and 40% by 2023 and 45% from trucks effective now must derive from wages paid at or in excess of $16 an hour. So I can go through that again. 30% for passenger vehicles and light trucks now, 40% by 2023, 45% for trucks effective now must derive from wages at or in excess of $16 an hour. Again, this qualification also does not have to be tied to a specific vehicle, but may be averaged by model line or class of vehicle. CBP and the Department of Labor will collaborate to determine if those wage requirements are being met. All records relating to certifications that a good qualifies for USMCA must be kept for 5 years. The Centers of Excellence and Expertise, as well as the USMCA Center, are always available to assist you with these questions. Regarding the actual verification process under USMCA, it's important to note that in the U.S., we're following relaxed enforcement for the first 6 months and up to a year for automotive vehicles. Given the new content requirement for vehicles, we understand that additional time is required to obtain information that had not previously been gathered under NAFTA, particularly to allow for averaging. The verification process actually begins with the automobile manufacturers filing certifications for regional value content, labor value content, as well as steel and aluminum content for CBP and Department of Labor review and approval. CBP will then select candidates for verification reviews based on a variety of factors, some random and some targeted. Claimants should expect some baseline verifications to establish compliance, ensure that complainants have appropriate systems in place for certification and record keeping. Given the new requirements for regional value content, labor, steel, and aluminum, and that they are not tied to specific vehicles, it's highly likely that USMCA verifications in the U.S. will include involvement by our regulatory auditors to determine if these requirements are being met. Claimants will likely receive correspondence from their applicable Center of Excellence and Expertise, as well as follow-up requests from our auditing staff. Final regulations won't be in place for several months, so it's possible that adjustments may be made to this process going forward. Finally, an important reminder, all documents must be retained for 5 years. I would highly encourage you to reach out to your particular Center of Excellence and Expertise for guidance as needed.
Thank you, Mark, on laying out what to expect once we get over our honeymoon. So thank you for clearly laying that out. I do have a question for you, John. I'm going to throw this one your way. And this is from Mr. Warren. Will goods that undergo a tariff shift in a foreign trade zone in the U.S. be considered originating in the U.S. if they meet the product rules of origin? Or will it be like Nafta?
I'm going to actually read my answer so I am precise on this point. So the U.S. law implementing the Nafta did contain a provision specifically preventing goods manufactured in a U.S. foreign trade zone, or FTZ, using non-originating materials from being eligible for NAFTA preferential treatment, tariff treatment. So that was the ruling under NAFTA. The U.S. legislation implementing the USMCA does not contain a similar provision. So we do not treat those FTZ manufacturing processes the same under USMCA as we did for NAFTA. We are awaiting and will take direction from Congress to change the law if they intend to make it similar to what it was in NAFTA. So again, right now, the USMCA does not contain that prohibition for the non-originating goods. So I hope that answers Mr. Warren's question, and if it doesn't, he can let me know.
Thank you, John, for giving us that precise answer. I want to remind viewers that you have the opportunity to submit questions for the panelists. Don't miss this opportunity to kind of tap their subject matter expertise in this area and get your questions out there. So I'll turn it over to Jorge to talk about some of the resources that you have available in Mexico, in additional information, what you have available on TMEC and how folks can get to that information.
Thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, there are a lot of resources that we have put in place now. In fact, most of them are actually agreed or are actually laid out in the agreement. I mean, for instance, just in Chapter 7, I think from Provision 7.2 to Provision 7.6 it's all about how we engage with you, with the traders, in terms of online publication. So we need to publish all the not just the text of the agreement, but also the sets of regulations that we put in place and that you need to comply. Also, there is a disposition for communication with traders, how we communicate with you. Also, dispositions on inquiry points to have specific inquiry points for your questions and queries. In terms of advanced rulings have been mentioned already a little bit. I think these advanced rulings. So we are putting together. Actually, we have a website with all where we are going to upload all the advanced rulings, and we're going to be updating these in a quarterly fashion as it is established in the uniform regulations. There is also an article on administrative guidance. So we are putting a lot of resources to give you, to assist you, to take you by the hand and work with you to these processes. I mean, and all these we have put it together in one single website. In fact, these websites, actually there are two official websites. So these you can find them in the website of this virtual trade week. There is there is space on the right where you will see these links to these two websites. So the first website is the one that the Tax Administration Service, which the Customs Administrations belong to the Tax Administration Service. So this website, you will find the point of contact, the email for trade facilitation, whether you want to ask a question on a pending issue or whether it is of a prospective operation. There is a number for a hotline specifically for duty drawback and duty deferral programs. There is, of course, as I was mentioning, the advanced rulings specific site where you will not just access the advanced rulings, but also where you can find where you can request, you can get the format to request an advanced ruling, and of course instructions on how to fill that form. There's a list of FAQs. Honestly, we've been receiving hundreds and thousands of questions of different issues, and we're making an effort to bundle them and to have like the main outstanding questions that we've been having constantly. So we have them there in the FAQs. And we are updating that. Actually, at the moment, I think we're in the third. We're working on the fourth update of these FAQs. So it's very useful. And of course, all the texts of the agreement and the regulations are there. And then the second website, which also is in the same, you will find in the same webpage of this virtual trade week, is the one that is hosted by the Ministry of Economy, where you can find similar but different resources as well. For instance, all the decisions from the Free Trade Commission are going to be posted, or actually are posted there. Reports, infographics, or let's say fact sheets. You're going to find in them fact sheets of specific chapters. So that will give you like a big knowledge of every chapter and the contents. Some other FAQs, let's say the ones that I mentioned before, are more related to customs and to border, or also related to origin and verifications, etc. And these FAQs under the webpage of the Ministry of Economy, then those are more related to like the agreement as a whole, the USMCA as a whole. But there is also a good resource as well, and there is a consultation center as well there, where you can as well post any questions that you can have, and then they will distribute it to whomever is the authority that it is related to. And just briefly, I'll mention, we also, and so this is, let's say, these are like the main resources that are available now, and we are also working on refining some other resources that we already had, but we are refining them due to this to the entry into force of USMCA, which are the Customs Operation Committees, which are groups of private sector and the Customs Authority, to go over the regulation, over the procedures, and to listen to your concerns on the day operation. So we have already that established, and we are refining that. Also, we have a customs facilitation committees. These trade facilitation committees are at the local level, so at the port of entry. They're headed by the port director, and the idea of these committees is to hear out some resources and some ideas of how can we facilitate the day-to-day operations at the border. So these are the main tools or resources that we have at the moment.
Just a few things.
Yes, exactly.
So if somehow you cannot get your questions answered by the many, many resources that Jorge has outlined, he will be providing his personal phone number to answer those questions. If you can go through all of those resources and can't get your question answered, he's availing himself to address those questions. That's just my little commentary. So resources, Doug, I know you alluded to it early on, but if you want to take a short opportunity to talk about the resources that CBSA has in place for implementation of Kuzma, where folks can find information, get questions answered, that would be great. Doug?
Sure. Thanks, Cynthia. I'll be brief. Very much similar to what Jorge was describing. I mentioned our publication, our webpage, Kuzma, what importers need to know. That's really your go-to first off, single shop for an overview of the changes, what the agreement means, as well as connection points to all of the various changes in regulation, customs notice, and D-memos that are resulting from the agreement. I'll come back to that in a second just for clarification. We also have a hotline. I'll send that number along to the organizers for distribution, as well as an email where you can send questions. Similarly, as Jorge was suggesting, we'll sift through all of the many questions that we get, and we'll publish an FAQ that's up to date. Our first one will be at the end of this month, and so watch for that, and we'll look forward to growing that. As you're reading those documents, a couple of peculiarities in the Canadian context for you to be aware of. We're really fortunate when it comes to moving quickly to implement international and other agreements and legislative changes. We can issue what they call customs notices. And these are like regulations in that they have the effect of law, but they aren't at the level of regulatory legal text. And so it allows us to move quickly, if you will. They're almost like interim regulations, and the final regulations follow. So when you see those customs notices, please pay careful attention to those. You'll also see what we call decision memoranda. I can't pronounce that. Memoranda. Thank you. And what those are the policies and the program required that lay out how we will interpret and apply the obligations that are set out in law, including in those customs notice. So there, if you will, the rules of the road that we in industry are to follow. So those are all available, as well as a list of all of the regulatory changes if your legal counsel wants to dig into the specifics. There's also a link to all of the licensed customs brokers in Canada in the event that you wanted to talk to them or secure their services, that they can help. So I'll provide those links as well, and I hope that helps.
Thank you, Doug. And within CBP, our Centers of Excellence and Expertise are a wonderful resource with respect to how USMCA intersects with those particular industry areas. Mark, do you have anything particular that you want to call out in terms of a resource from the Automotive and Aerospace Center?
cbp.gov, and you hit the trade tab, you'll see the link for your contacting your center and getting the center directory. And then feel free to reach out to your center. If you're unsure what that center is, you can start with basically your commodity group, and then that center can let you know whether or not they handle you. If that sounds a bit confusing, we have large multinational corporations, and so a determination is made, at what particular industry group is their largest focus, but then we are responsible for everything that account imports. So I would advise you, if you're not familiar with your center, get to know which center is yours. Sometimes the quickest way is to simply ask your broker, because they deal with us on a regular basis. And then reach out to them. Even if you're contemplating getting into taking advantage of the USMCA, it's a good time to have a sit down, or in this case, a conversation with somebody from your center, and ask them what's needed, have them go over what's available to them. I would also encourage people to start. The USMCA Center has an excellent website, and they have webinars there, particularly dealing with rules of origin. So that's a great place to start if you want to know what applies to your specific commodity, and then contact your center and ask for any help or guidance with any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mark. So I'm thinking that either the three countries have done such an outstanding job with getting questions answered that we're not getting many questions today. I encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity to raise questions. And I hope I haven't discouraged anyone by calling out the questioner's name, but I thought about it in terms of if we were in a physical venue, we would see you and you would walk up to a microphone and you would introduce yourself and let us know either your industry or who you're affiliated with. So again, with that in mind, again, please feel free to use the chat function. So Patrick, I'm going to pull you in here and maybe talk about a little bit more the opportunities that this agreement provides, whether it's specific industries or some more of your perspectives on opportunities. Patrick?
Okay, thank you. It's as I mentioned earlier, I think the combination of a number of factors leading with the the fact that we now have a new trade agreement. We have, I think, at least 16 years of certainty in terms of the trade relationship among the three countries, coupled with supply chain leaders changing their strategies and looking to de-risk global supply chains. And all of that should favor North America. I think there's significant evidence looking at some of the data. There's a study that's conducted every year by a consulting firm called Kearney that does what's called a nearshoring index, and they look at the trends in importation of products from various markets around the world into North America. And I think there is pretty good evidence that some of the data that they have produced recently in their 2019 study, that China, specifically China, as a source of products moving into North America from other so-called low-cost Asian countries, something called the China Diversified Index, has fallen consistently over the last 3 or 4 years, even before COVID. And if you look at, again, of interest to us and our company and our customers, Mexico, as a percentage of the products that are sold to the rest of North America related to those low-cost Asian countries, Mexico's market share has increased fairly significantly from 2018 to 2019, again, prior to the COVID pandemic. So some of these trends were well on their way, and there's just no doubt that the COVID health pandemic has created more interest in moving that investment, creating jobs in North America to serve North American markets. Now, can I give you a long list of examples of projects that have been announced since USMCA went into force? No, we know of some. They tend to be smaller, but I think another factor that has clouded some of the investment decisions that we believe are in the pipeline or being considered is COVID and the impact that that's going to have on the North American and global economy for the foreseeable future. So again, I think some of this is anecdotal. Some of this is supported by data going back 2 or 3 years, even before the COVID pandemic. I think one of the things that's also important that, and it's been discussed in a number of different areas here, that I think we as the business community need to be focused on and aware of, is to make sure, unlike Nafta, that this agreement doesn't get stale, that it doesn't sit on the shelf for 25 years, which is, I think, some of the intention behind some of these competitiveness committees and the intention of what I mentioned in my opening comments about reestablishing this high-level economic dialogue between the cabinet level administration in all three countries and the private sector, to make sure that we don't allow this agreement to get old and stale and and lose its relevance as the business world changes and things happen that none of us today will be able to predict. So I'd like to think that that we can find a mechanism to do that between the business community, between elected officials at all levels of government, state, local, federal, certainly, to make sure that USMCA doesn't become the target of political rhetoric that NAFTA had become almost since its inception in every certainly every presidential campaign since NAFTA was put in place 25 years ago. That will help, I think, go a long way in terms of creating an environment of stability and make sure, again, that we take advantage of this opportunity that I believe exists for all three countries in North America.
Thank you, Patrick, for providing those perspectives. One last question, John, about on top of the rules of origin changes, the USMCA also provides expanded opportunities for information sharing and mutual assistance between the three parties on customs issues. Can you elaborate on those opportunities?
Sure. So I think one of the most important opportunities that we have and that we do take advantage of is our cooperation with CBSA and SAT. So on up to the entry into force, of course, there was a ton of negotiation and collaboration. And then once we hit our EIF date, really it's in the hands of our customs administrations, and we've continued that dialogue and will continue it. So we're actually meeting bi-weekly with both CBSA and SAT. We've had a long history of a good relationship with both, and I think this agreement will provide an opportunity to continue that. And there's no lack of issues that are facing us that we're going to have to continue to talk about and come to agreement on. In particular, in the automotive area, we've also talked about at least in the U.S., the foreign trade zone issue, and there's a host of others that will have to be sorted out as time goes on. I talked earlier about the USMCA being kind of a new standard for customs work, and we like this really to be a kind of a gold-plated example for the rest of the world, really. North America to be setting the example for all the other customs administrations in the world about best practices. Many of them are contained in the World Trade Organization's Trade Facilitation Agreement, but the USMCA has taken those concepts and made them part of the agreement. And I mentioned earlier the single window concept that all three of our countries are now operating, the Authorized Economic Operator, Trusted Trader program that we all have, advisory committees. In the United States, we have our Commercial Operations Advisory Committee that Commissioner Morgan had mentioned. That's been a very, very effective way for the private sector to have their views known to customs. The system of using risk-based analysis and targeting in our customs work, really to focus on the shipments that are of most concern and let the compliant ones move through quickly and efficiently. And finally, the advanced binding ruling program that all three countries have availed themselves are. So companies can get predictability, can know, have certainty on how their shipments are going to be treated by customs. So the binding ruling program has been very, very effective. So I think USMCA codifying these concepts are really going to go a long way, and I think are going to influence hopefully the rest of the customs administrations worldwide and the customs the World Customs Organization really. And so I think USMCA can be a kind of a template for that. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, as this panel is coming to a close, I'd like to give our panelists an opportunity to provide some closing remarks. And I'll start with, we'll kind of go somewhat in the order that we started, with Jorge first.
Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you to all my fellow panelists. I think I really enjoyed it. This was great, and to you, our partners, our main partners, which are the trader community, we really want you to come to the authority and to really feel that we are partnering with you in this endeavor of helping you to comply with everything that that the free trade agreement has, but also to make the best of it. Because just right now, John was saying or was mentioning some of the benefits or some of the opportunities, but I can assure you that there are plenty of opportunities, and you just have to go and read the chapter 7 on customs administration and trade facilitation. There are a great deal of opportunities in terms of data harmonization, single window, in terms of processes such as unified cargo processing, which, by the way, Pat, we are hoping to, in this new rail in Laredo, new rail crossing, perhaps we can of course have the unified cargo processing. So this is a great thing. I mean, there are many positive things and opportunities. Please really get to know the agreement, and we are here to walk you through. And with that, I'll just turn back to you, Cynthia, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, Jorge. Doug, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Cynthia. And again, really delighted to have had the opportunity to be with you today. I'll be very brief. As was noted, it is time to take a deep breath. I think on Origin, I should have mentioned, we asked industry to give us all of the examples that they were thinking of using or have been told they should use. And I had my chief audit executive go through them all. And I'm pleased to say not one of them was unsatisfactory. Not one of them. Because when it comes to verification and audit, we've got to live the principle of that's embedded in the CUSMA, which is focusing on the outcome, not the prescriptive approach. Finally, I just want to say that, as with the pandemic, we're all in this together. And so let's get on rolling up the sleeves and doing the hard work of implementation. I really agree with the point about keeping this alive. Implementation is never easy, but it's where the gains really get leveraged and maximized. So that's something that we can and only do together as custom agencies and with you as the industry is implicated and opportunistic as you are by this new deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. I'll turn it over to Mark. A little out of order.
Thank you, Deck Wittenberg. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be on the panel. Thanks to my fellow panel members and everyone who tuned in to this WebEx meeting to gather more information on USMCA. I would like to add to earlier remarks regarding available resources. The centers do conduct bidirectional trainings, and that's where our accounts provide training to us that they believe will help us understand their systems and the appropriate classification and valuation of their merchandise. And we conversely do the same for them. So if you are an account, particularly a managed account, please contact your center with your requests or any suggestions. I know that the USMCA Center does have a group that is providing virtual training. We can coordinate that for you. So please feel free to take advantage of that. USMCA is, as I stated earlier, one in a long line of free trade agreements. It is certainly unique in its complexity and in its depth, but it is certainly something that we are ready as an agency to tackle. So don't hesitate to contact us with anything you need. So thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Mark. Patrick, any last words?
I would just say let's not let complacency set in. Let's take every opportunity we can, whether it's talking to your local, state, federal, congressman, representative, a Congress member. Just make sure that our elected officials don't lose sight of how important this is to the future of North America and the economic growth. I think in the past, what I believe is that we fought this from time to time in the course of political campaigns, we dodge a bullet, we wipe our brow, we breathe a sigh of relief, and we go about our business. So let's not let that happen with this trade agreement. Let's keep it relevant and keep our voices elevated with our political leaders to make sure they understand how important this is to our economies. Thank you. I've enjoyed this a great deal, and thank you for inviting me to participate.
Thank you, Patrick. John, I'll turn it over to you for last word.
Thank you, ma'am. Again, so Jorge, Mark, Pat, and Doug, great to see you all virtually. I wish we were together in a nice location like Anaheim or similar type of area, but hopefully in the near future we'll have that opportunity. It's been great to have this discussion with you. I'll make one final plug for our USMCA Center. CBP has really put a lot of resources into this this capability. Please take advantage of it, either by email or by looking at our website. But we really have put this into place so that both you, the trade community, will succeed, as well as our customs administration. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Ms. Wittenberg.
Thank you. Well, I will say thank you, many thanks to Jorge, Doug, Patrick, Mark, and John. You've said it all as we come to a close of this Nafta TMEC Kuzma hour. And you've not left anything for me to say other than thank you all for choosing to spend the last 2 hours with us. And I will put in an advertisement for tomorrow's panel discussion. And I hope that you have registered for the remainder of this CBP's Virtual Trade Week. Tomorrow is sure to be a spirited discussion on forced labor. So with that said, thank you again and have a great day.
Thank you.